In the 1960s television series The Prisoner, former secret agents abducted and imprisoned in a village where he is known only as Number 6. Which village in North Wales was used for most of the exterior shots in the series?
Port Merion.
Yes, Number 6 makes many unsuccessful attempts to escape the village. What vehicle does he try to escape in at the end of the first episode, unaware that it's being controlled by Number 2?
Helicopter.
Yep. What's the name of the massive white balloon that acts as a security device in the village?
Rover.
Yep. The general is revealed to be a large computer which Number 6 destroys by asking it a question that he says cannot be answered. What is the question?
Why?
Yes. What title does Number 6 give to his multi-piece abstract sculpture that wins the village art competition? It's actually a boat.
Escape.
Yep. Number 6 is twice seen taking part in a martial art involving 2 trampolines and a pool of water. What's it called?
Cusho.
Yeah. Yes. Throughout the series, Number 6 is questioned about why he resigned from his job. What's the name of the interrogation technique that Number 2 uses for 7 days in Once Upon a Time?
Degree absolute.
Yes. What piece does Number 6 represent when he takes part in the human game of chess in the episode Checkmate?
Queen's Pawn.
Yep. In the chimes of Big Ben, Number 2 watches Number 6 put on an item of clothing and says he makes even that appear as a gesture of defiance. What's the item of clothing?
Dressing gown.
Dressing gown. In the final episode, what song does Number 48 sing that causes the members of the Assembly to jump from their seats and eventually join in?
Dem Bones.
Yeah. What building is Number 2 seen entering at the end of the final episode after escaping the village with Number 6 and 48?
House of Commons. Palace of Westminster.
Yeah, House of Parliament. What is the first question Number 2 asks Number 6 after he takes the speed learning course on European history since Napoleon?
In what year was the Treaty of Adrianople?
Exactly right.
The Prisoner was a British television series, first broadcast on ITV, and was the brainchild of its star, Patrick McGoohan. Although only lasting 17 episodes, it is still widely regarded today as something of a landmark TV moment, and in this video, I hope to delve into why. But first, a quick disclaimer. This series is now 57 years old, and for many years has had the label of cult attached to it. After enough time passes, you tend to find the term cult ceases to be an adequate one, and certain works start to get relabeled as classic or masterpiece. Patrick McGoohan was clearly an intellectual. Some would even go so far as dubbing him a genius. And so, as you can imagine, the underlying themes of the series have been endlessly analysed and debated over the years by, I'm only too happy to admit, greater minds than my own. So I apologise up front for my GCSE level reading of the philosophy of the series, and I will attempt to make the structure of this video more of an overview of the series as a whole, with a little taster of COD analysis thrown in for good measure. Patrick McGoohan was the star of the early 60s espionage series Danger Man, or Secret Agent as it was known in the States. He played the part of spy John Drake between 1960 and 1968. After shooting a mere 2 episodes of the 4th season, the only ones incidentally shot in colour, he suddenly decided to quit the series. He revealed his plans to head of ITC Lou Grade at a meeting which took place, by all accounts, at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning. Grade was responsible for such staples of 60s television as The Saint, Return of the Saint, The Champions, Randall and Hopkirk Deceased, The Persuaders, Department S and its spin-off Jason King, and of course Danger Man. Grade's rendezvous with McGoohan led to a deal being struck, possibly an unprecedented one in the history of television, before or since. Grade, instead of trying to persuade McGoohan to stay on by offering him a more lucrative contract, and not wanting to lose the, at the time, highest paid and most popular star on British television, instead decided to appeal to McGoohan's want for artistic credibility and asked him if he had any ideas for further projects. McGoohan proceeded to pitch an idea for a show centering around an unnamed protagonist who, as portrayed in the opening sequence, would resign from a position of great importance only to return to his London flat, be rendered unconscious via knockout gas, and wake up in an exact replica of his home in an undisclosed, picturesque locale known only as the Village. Henceforth, the protagonist would no longer be referred to by his name, but instead by the number 6. His real name would go unstated for the entirety of the series. Every member of the village would have a number assigned to them, even those in charge, the ever-changing number 2 and the unseen number 1. McGoohan had been toying with this fresh concept ever since filming the pilot episode of Danger Man, View from the Villa, which was shot partly in the Folly village of Portmeirion, Wales, a location frequently used on British television, as it was the perfect double for Italy. McGoohan thought the place would make a great setting for an entire series. His pitch may have also been partly inspired by another Danger Man episode, Colony 3, in which John Drake infiltrates a community where former spies are being taken and moulded by the other side. From this initial concept, a great number of intriguing conceits and story possibilities would emanate. The format lent itself perfectly to the spy genre, even though it may not, strictly speaking, be about spies. Many assume McGoohan's character is resigning from the Secret Service, but it is never actually confirmed for the most part what Number 6's previous profession was. The series takes on the veneer of a spy series, such as the ones ATV were producing at the time, like The Saint or Department S, but McGoohan merely used the structure of a typical espionage show as a way of making his more outlandish and erudite concepts accessible to a general audience. Like pretty much anything to come along in 1967, The Prisoner looks so of the moment. There are some very trippy sequences in here. The representation of the village takes on an almost Edwardian inspiration. It has a pagan carnival atmosphere, perpetually celebrating Maypole Day and filtered through an English phantasmagoria by way of Lewis Carroll. The genius of The Prisoner is that although the format allowed great scope for genre storytelling, Number 6's repeated attempts of escaping the village and his constant antagonism and occasional thwarting of authority in the guise of the ever-changing Number 2. The big joke being that in 1967 Patrick McGoohan encountered more Number 2s than your average sewage worker. It also allowed great scope to explore some more thoughtful, philosophical themes. As well as the spy series, the other genre it has a firm foothold in is science fiction. The repeated attempts by the village authorities to brainwash Number 6 and get him to reveal why he resigned lead to some of the most intriguing and engaging storylines from 60s television as a whole. Although a little dated in its presentation now, in a day and age when overarching storylines have superseded the story of the week approach, you can make an argument that it was shows like The Prisoner or The Fugitive in the States that represented the earliest examples of the overarching story. Dr. Richard Kimball's wife is murdered by a one-armed man in episode 1 of The Fugitive. We know that in the final episode, he will find the one-armed man and clear his name. Similarly, the prisoner is captured and imprisoned in the village in episode 1. We know he will probably escape in the final episode. Everything that happens in between is just exciting adventure storytelling. But if you ask me, the thing that has really had the fans returning to the series time and again throughout the years is the element of intrigue and ambiguity presented by some of the questions the series posed, most of which have been left unanswered to this day. Who is Number 6? Why did he resign? Which side runs the village? Who actually is Number 1? And what the hell was that series final all about? Bear with me, as I do believe I have the answers to these questions, but to give you any form of satisfactory revelation, we must first take a look at the series as a whole. Episode 1 is Arrival. After handing in his resignation, our unnamed protagonist returns to his London abode. A hearse driver filters knockout gas into his flat. The protagonist collapses and awakens in an exact replica of his home in an unfamiliar location. He is introduced to the place by the mysterious Number 2, who informs him he cannot leave, and from here on in will only be referred to as Number 6.
Good day, number 6.
Number what?
6. For official purposes, everyone has a number. Yours is number 6.
I am not a number. I am a person.
6 of one, half a dozen of another.
He attempts to flee across the beach, but is rendered unconscious by Rover, a sinister floating air balloon that appears to keep order in check across the whole village. Number 6 awakens in the hospital and meets Cobb, a former colleague. He is later informed Cobb has committed suicide by jumping from the hospital window. Number 6 attends Cobb's funeral, where he talks to Number 9, who tells him of a plan she was hatching with Cobb to steal a helicopter and escape. She provides Number 6 with a pass, which he uses to acquire a helicopter, but as he flies off, a technician in village security takes control and returns the prisoner to the village. In the episode's final moments, we see Cobb is very much alive and has been in collusion with Number 2 the whole time. A series premiere is always a tough nut to crack.
You'll find him a tough nut to crack.
As well as telling a compelling story, you also have to include a lot of exposition for the series as a whole, and unfortunately, both these fundamentals get slightly shortchanged in Arrival. By all accounts, the original edit overran more than any other episode, and there is evidence of this in the finished product, like some very short, jarring edits in the first half. The Cobb storyline doesn't even begin until the halfway mark, and feels a little crowbarred in. The reveal at the end that he is still alive is slightly underwhelming, as we got to spend so little time with this character in his single establishing scene. The plot really serves as a slight example to the audience of what will be the series' formula, that of Number 6's repeated escape plans perpetually being thwarted through double crosses, plot twists, and the fact you can really trust no one in this brand new environment our protagonist has been unwillingly thrust into. There is a mid-episode changeover of Number 2s as opposed to taking place between episodes, as will become the series' norm for the most part here on in. On the whole, Arrival is fairly solid entertainment. The intrigue of the series' central premise does carry the episode a long way, but it is far from The Prisoner at its best. McGoohan originally only envisioned 7 episodes, a revolutionary concept in 1967 when the miniseries wasn't really a thing. Grade initially attempted to persuade McGoohan to produce 26, or 2 series of 13, as 26 was a more palatable number from a business standpoint, allowing Grade far greater opportunity to sell the series to the lucrative foreign markets. There is some debate over whether McGoohan and Grade agreed on 17 episodes there and then, or whether the original intention was to produce 26 and Grade, tiring of this little television experiment he never fully understood in the first place, and deeming it to be not quite the rating smash he had originally envisioned, decided to cut the running order short 2/3 of the way through production. Whichever scenario it was, we only got 17 episodes in the end, and frankly, it's something of a small miracle McGoohan compromised and produced as many as he did. For the record, here are a list of The Prisoner episodes in broadcast order, here are a list of the episodes in production order, and here are a list of the 7 episodes which McGoohan originally envisioned. These are the 10 which were devised to fulfill the running order of 17. Here are some titles of scripts written but never produced. And if you are at all interested, here is my own personal preferred running order for the series, if to be viewed as one complete series, and my running order if to be viewed as 2 separate seasons. But whatever your preferred running order may be, I think the only stipulation should be that you view Arrival first, and Once Upon a Time and Fallout last. The order of the intervening 14 episodes really doesn't matter, if you don't mind overlooking the odd minor continuity error here and there.
I'm new here.
Special delivery. Sign your number here, number 6.
In order to distinguish this video from other Prisoner retrospectives, I thought it might be fun to look at the rest of the series in my own personal running order. I urge anyone unfamiliar with the series, or even if you are familiar with it, but are looking for a novel viewing approach, to watch the episodes along with me in the order I am about to discuss them. For those that couldn't care less about my running order, I shall refer to each episode by its broadcast number from here on, and you can figure it out for yourself. Episode 9 is Checkmate. Number 6 takes the position of Queen's Pawn in a human game of chess. An illegal move by the Rook leads to his withdrawal, and he is taken to the village hospital. Number 2 brainwashes the Queen to fall in love with Number 6. She reveals to him a locket bearing his picture, which turns out to be a radio transmitter to track him. He jerry-rigs a radio out of various pilfered parts and hails a passing ship. However, it transpires the ship is one of the village vessels, and Number 6 is returned and escorted back to land. One of the most iconic images of the series is probably the human chess game. You could argue that it is a rather heavy-handed metaphor, but the use of chess to represent a twist-laden plot featuring characters attempting to best each other probably wasn't as overused as an analogy in 1967 as it is today.
Tonight at moonset, rook to queen's pawn 6, check.
A cliché only becomes a cliché because of its brilliant originality on its initial use. Future Department S and Jason King actor Peter Wingard appears as a martial arts practicing dandy Number 2, a wonderfully eccentric, charismatic actor who some cite as being the inspiration for Austin Powers. I urge you to seek out his one and only album. It's really quite something for lovers of highly quirky and eccentric music. I mean, well, I'll just let this brief snippet speak for itself.
The Italian rape. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Quante lira? Look into my eyeballs, you will see the fire. How much lira have you got? Only a quarter? Oh, Madonna, you didn't daughter. For that, I'll have your daughter. Oh, gee! Japanese rape, of course.
Episode 8 is Dance of the Dead. Number 6 discovers a dead man washed up on the village beach. He finds a wallet and a radio set in the dead man's jacket. He hides the body in a cave and tries the radio. Later, he sets the body afloat with a rescue note, but is seen by a former colleague, Dutton. Number 2 has been using Dutton to obtain information on Number 6, but now deems him expendable. Number 6 receives an invitation to the village carnival, where he is put on trial and sentenced to death by Number 2, dressed as Peter Pan. He flees with the villagers in pursuit. He takes refuge in a back room, but is discovered by Number 2, who informs him that the villagers don't know he is already dead. This is one of the oddest episodes, not for its surreal elements, which still hadn't come to the forefront by this stage in the series, merely for its presentation. The story has an aimlessness to it, like it was cobbled together from 2 or 3 different scripts that didn't really gel. How does the attempted hypnosis of Number 6 in the early scenes factor into the rest of the story? Who was the dead man on the beach? How does the trial at the end relay into anything else in the story, other than a layman's allusion to Kafka's The Trial and Number 6's execution sentence playing thematically into the episode's motif of the dead? Why does Number 2 dress as Peter Pan, other than actress Mary Morris looking like she was born to wear that costume? The carnival/trial scene feels the most prisoner-esque thing in the episode and somewhat redeems the story, but on the whole, this one is really a failed attempt at an ambiguous narrative, something the series would usually excel at. Episode 4 is Free for All. It is revealed to number 6 that the village holds democratic elections. Number 2 brainwashes number 6 into standing to be his successor. Setting out his election campaign, number 6 manages to win over the electorate and is seemingly promoted to the position of the new number 2. Upon entering the Green Dome with the intent of meeting number 1, he is repeatedly slapped back to lucidity by number 58. After attempting to instigate a mass exodus from the village, to no avail.
You are free to go! Free to go! Free to go! You are free to go!
Number 58 reveals herself to be the real incoming number 2, and the whole election campaign was merely another ruse to break him. In episode 4, the prisoner adds another genre to its repertoire, satire, as personified in some genuinely witty scenes, such as the village press seemingly making up every election promise after receiving the clipped response of no comment to questions put to number 6 on his campaign trail.
How are you going to handle your campaign?
No comment.
Intends to fight for freedom at all costs. How about your internal policy?
No comment.
Will tighten up on village security.
Smile!
How about your external policy?
No comment.
Our exports will operate in every corner of the globe. How do you feel about life and death?
Mind your own business.
No comment.
Prisoner aficionados have concocted many theories over the years as to number 6's origins. The one which seems to hold the greatest traction is that the character McGoohan plays in the show is John Drake, the same character he played in Danger Man or Secret Agent, and The Prisoner is merely a sequel series. This theory took hold thanks to publicity shots from Danger Man being used in the resignation scene from the series opening credits, and as number 6's campaign photo in Free For All. As number 6 goes unnamed, this theory seems to have taken hold over the years, thanks in large part to the Prisoner's story editor George Markstein, who I believe to be the one most responsible for the accessible, generic espionage aspects of the series, stating his belief that number 6 and John Drake were one and the same person. It was further confounded in 1969 and 1970 respectively, with the publication of the novels Number 2 by David McDaniel and A Day in the Life by Hank Stein, both of which explicitly state that number 6 is John Drake. However, McGoohan, over the years, has contradicted Markstein's belief and repeatedly stated the fact that number 6 and John Drake were not the same character. In fact, when McGoohan initially pitched the idea to Grade, he said he didn't want to play the central character at all, for fear of comparisons with his former TV role. One of Grade's stipulations for producing the series was that McGoohan star, as it would make the series a lot easier to market. Do I believe that number 6 is John Drake? No, I don't, for the reasons I've just stated. But in a way, it doesn't really matter if he is or not. Number 6, as presented in the series, isn't really a character. He is a cipher, a representation of the nonconformist, rebelling against the system. The biggest clue to who number 6 actually is comes from the name of McGoohan's production company, Everyman Films. Yes, number 6 is the Everyman. I said this would be GCSE level. Episode 2 is The Chimes of Big Ben. A new arrival is moved in next door to the prisoner, Nadia, bearing an Eastern European accent and possessing of a superior swimming ability. She befriends number 6 and reveals to him that prior to her arrival, she had learned of the existence of the village and its location. According to Nadia, the village is located off the coast of Lithuania in the Baltic Sea. The pair feign a romance to ward off the suspicions of number 2 as they hatch an escape plan which involves number 6 entering the village Arts and Crafts Festival and using his exhibition piece as a makeshift sailing vessel. The pair escape around the headland to rendezvous with Nadia's contact. They are spotted by village surveillance, Rover is deployed, and they are forced to swim to shore. The contact gives number 6 his watch, as his own was damaged in the seawater, before the pair are crated up and shipped back to Blighty. 12 hours later, they are let out into 6's old office. As number 6 explains about the village, the chimes of Big Ben are heard in the background.
I resigned. Because for a very long time, just a minute. 8 o'clock.
Number 6 realises it's 8 o'clock, which is what the contact's watch says. However, if he had just travelled from Lithuania, his watch should be an hour out. After discovering a tape recorder playing the background sounds of London, he exits the office and finds it was merely a mock-up and he was in the village the whole time. The trip back to London, merely an elaborate ruse to trick him into revealing the reason behind his resignation. Nadia stands with number 2, having been in on the subterfuge the whole time. The Chimes of Big Ben is a good episode, containing one of the great last-minute reveals in the whole of television. Nowadays, the character thinks they are in one locale but turns out they are in another trope is fairly played out, but, and I may be wrong about this, I'm fairly sure this is where that cliche originated. Please correct me if anyone is aware of its use prior to this. Maybe there's a Twilight Zone episode which ends this way, but no specific one springs to mind. Aside from the ending, the rest of the episode is merely set up for this killer twist. However, it is highly elevated by the performance of Nadia Gray as, well, Nadia. Possessing of an alluring middle-aged sexiness, her and McGoohan have great on-screen chemistry together, imbibing the final revelation that she is a village collaborator with a bittersweet, melancholic vibe. You kind of want to see these two get together. Episode 5 is The Schizoid Man. Number 6 awakes to find himself in a different village apartment with a decidedly different appearance. He discovers he is now left-handed and has different taste in foods.
Do you think I'd forgotten we used to call you Flapjack Charlie?
And yes, apparently in some quarters, pancakes were also known as flapjacks. Who knew? Everyone in the village now refers to him as Number 12. Number 2 has brought a doppelganger of Number 6 to the village. Our Number 6 attempts to prove to Number 2 that he is the original by demonstrating a psychic link he has supposedly developed with Number 24, as established in the opening scene. He has her state the shapes on a series of cards only he can see.
There's a couple of wavy lines.
Sorry, this isn't your lucky day.
Get a little tired of this!
She, however, gets more of the answers correct, with the imposter. Returning to his new apartment, he discovers the bruise on the fingernail he sustained in the opening scene has moved, suggesting that it took more than a single night to transform into this new persona. He recalls in flashback the Pavlovian aversion therapy he was subjected to in a catatonic state and gives himself an electric shock in order to restore the instinctual use of his right hand. Okay. He confronts the imposter and forces him to reveal his password and name, which turns out to be Curtis, before Curtis flees and is mistakenly killed by Rover. Posing as Curtis, the prisoner tells Number 2 that Number 6 is dead and he must now return to report his failure. Before leaving, Number 2 asks Number 6 to pass on his regards to Susan, Curtis's wife. He is then blindfolded and boards the helicopter, which proceeds to circle the village, then return him before Number 2 reveals that Susan is dead.
Susan died a year ago, Number 6.
Something that Number 6, in the guise of Curtis, failed to acknowledge. The Schizoid Man is one of the more sci-fi-esque stories in the series. Despite not taking place in a decidedly sci-fi setting, the beats of the story could easily have taken place aboard the Enterprise in 1960s Star Trek. However, the doppelganger conceit does serve to highlight some of the series' greater themes, that of the duality of man and the erosion of identity as number 6 is forced to confront who he actually is and whether there is such a thing as self. The show would go on to play with these notions in the episodes A Change of Mind and Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling. From an acting perspective, you can see McGoohan really relishing the opportunity to play dual roles, imbibing the imposter number 6 with a snide smugness.
One of number 2's little ideas, I suppose? Where'd they get you? A people's copying service, or are you one of those double agents we hear so much about these days?
The state-of-the-art split-screen effects are really excellent and hold up to this day. Having a single actor playing two-hander scenes with himself is not easy to pull off, but McGoohan manages to time these dialogue exchanges expertly to a point where you almost forget there is any trick photography involved. Though it is nice of imposter number 6 to wear the never-seen-again white blazer in order not to confuse the audience too greatly. The prisoner is very English. Everyone lived on marmalade on toast and tea in the UK in the 60s. There is a proliferation of expressions. McGoohan loved a catchphrase and nursery rhymes.
The mountain can come to Mahomet.
Pat a cake, baker's man. Bake me a cake as fast as you can.
Off goes the weasel.
Seesaw, Marjorie Daw, Jackie shall have a new master.
It's remembered now as being that weird series. There were one or two elements that made it a little off-kilter, most notably Rover. The concept of an air balloon, something you would consider to be flimsy, benign, and not at all a life-threatening deterrent, is realised as arguably the most sinister component of the series. Rover is the thing you must have in any great prison drama, the sociopathic prison guard who keeps order in check by any means necessary, death if need be. It was actually a happy accident McGoohan ended up picking a weather balloon to represent village security. Originally, there was far more of a practical, police-inspired robotic drone that was going to keep guard over the village. However, the prop that was constructed, which was supposed to act as an automobile, hovercraft, and something that could climb walls, just did not work in the Portmeirion setting. Sand and water got into its gears on the beach, and after a couple of days filming, it was quickly deemed to be impractical, and a rethink was needed. This was when McGoohan spotted a weather balloon flying over Portmeirion. He asked the prop department if he could get his hands on 50 of them, and so Rover was born. The image of the weather balloon, when paired with the chilling guttural anguish cry that Rover emits, make it one of the most haunting visuals in the whole of television. Episode 6 is The General. Speedlearn is introduced to the village, a subliminal process for educating the population, developed by a professor with the aid of an unseen general, alluded to at the end of the previous episode, The Schizoid Man, in an uncharacteristic bit of series continuity.
The General's not going to behead you. We won't know until I've reported to the General, will we? Report to the General? That's a new one.
The professor realises that his creation has the ability to be abused by number 2, and with the help of number 6, intends to destroy the General. After their attempt fails, number 2 takes number 6 to meet the General, who, it transpires, is not a person but a sophisticated, for the time, mainframe computer which has purportedly been programmed to be able to answer any question put to it. Outlandish, I know. Number 6 challenges the machine, stating there is one question it cannot answer. After number 6 inputs his question, the General short-circuits and self-destructs, killing its creator in the process. A distraught number 2 demands to know what the question was.
What was your question?
W-H-Y. Question mark.
Why?
Why?
The General does have an intriguing premise and plays out well for the most part. However, I find its overall thesis to be a little muddled. The Speedlearn concept is a solid notion for the series to play with, and suggests one of the functions for the inhabitants of the village is to act as guinea pigs for experimental mind control technology. However, the notion doesn't really play into the episode's denouement in a wholly satisfactory way when the General is revealed to be merely your stock all-powerful science fiction computer. Number 6's takedown of the machine does seem oddly quaint in this day and age where we all effectively carry the General around in our pockets. Not to ruin things for anyone, but you can't break Google by typing in the word why with a question mark. If you are to try it, you simply get this.
Nice try, but my head was built with paradox-absorbing crumple zones.
Episode 3 is A, B and C. Number 2 attempts to use a new wonder drug created by number 14 to tap into 6's subconscious and discover why he resigned. Number 6 is sedated and his dreams are manipulated and monitored over a period of 3 nights. 3 mysterious figures from his past are introduced through a pioneering scientific technique into his dreams in the hope he will inadvertently let slip to one of them the reason behind his resignation. After the first 2 attempts are unsuccessful, number 6 realizes he is being experimented upon and contrives to turn the tables. Heavily diluting the 3rd dose of the drug and feigning sedation, he is able to lucidly dream and manipulate the events witnessed by 2 and 40, introducing a masked shadowy figure from his past. Number 2, fearing reprisal from higher up, desperately wants to see the person's face and is dismayed once the mask is removed to see his own staring right back at him. In A, B and C, number 6 plays the part of the unreliable narrator, one of the elements that leads to the enigmatic quality of the character. Any revelations about our central protagonist's past have to be taken with a pinch of salt. My personal favourite episodes are the stories where McGoohan triumphs and leaves the current residing number 2 a broken man, as opposed to the darker he remains a prisoner denouement of most episodes. Getting one in the eye of authority may be the only true victory we are able to achieve in this world. You will never take down the system, but purely on a one-to-one basis, you can endlessly take down the individual. A, B and C layers in this conceit from the get-go, establishing in the very first scene that the current residing number 2 has one final chance of breaking number 6 or he is gone, and the episode's final moment, the ringing of the lone telephone, spells out number 2's fate to the audience without the use of any dialogue. We never even hear the voice on the other end of the line once in the entirety of the series. It's an expert masterclass in storytelling, chilling in its simplicity. I get the sense, plot-wise at least, that this one is probably what Lou Grade wanted from the series, hence its placement so high in the original running order. It may not have the complexity and analogous quality of some of the other episodes, but it sure makes up for that in entertainment value. A, B and C is pure 60s espionage / sci-fi storytelling at its best. A really fun episode. Number 2 represents the ever-changing face of bureaucracy. Yeah, I said this was going to be a GCSE level reading of the series. It was a bold decision to not have one actor play the central villain, but a series of ever-changing 60s character actors. Although the prisoner may have benefited from someone with the gravitas of a Leo McKern in the role throughout the series, it would have tipped the balance away from being a star vehicle for McGoohan, and be remembered now as more of a two-hander between McGoohan and McKern. It would have shifted the focus of the series in favour of dynamic acting, which is there, sure, but isn't really what the prisoner is remembered for now, and it would have been had you had an actor with the gravitas of McKern in the role of number 2 throughout the series. It would have also detracted greatly from the message that there is no single bad guy out there who we can unanimously focus our efforts in defeating, because we are unwilling to own up to the fact that the real villains are anyone and everyone. Who does number 2 work for?
Who does number 2 work for?
It's never explicitly stated it's number 1. There is a higher power on the prescient mobile phones that the various number 2s speak into, but for all we know, there could be another random changing face of bureaucracy at the other end. Ultimately, it's not important. The fact we never see who number 2 is working for is the point. The concept of the faceless autocrat is a myth the series' aim was ultimately to dispel. Episode 12 is a change of mind. After becoming involved in a fight with 2 thugs, number 6 is declared unmutual by the village committee, who recommend he goes instant social treatment. However, due to number 6's importance, he is not administered the treatment, only tricked into thinking he has had it. Upon realizing he has been duped, he manages to get the village doctor on his side. Number 6 convinces number 2 that the ploy has worked, informing him that he wants to publicly confess to everyone. Number 2 arranges for the whole village to hear number 6 speak. The program number 86 arrives on cue at the stroke of 4 o'clock and loudly charges number 2 with being unmutual. The villagers turn on number 2, who is forced to flee through the village streets. Episodes 10 to 12 of The Prisoner form a loose trilogy of number 6 defeating number 2 storylines, and this one, unfortunately, is the least satisfying of the 3. The desolation of number 2 denouement feels more of an afterthought rather than something born of the cause and effect of the story. In fact, I've more often than not had to remind myself what this one was about on series revisits, as A Change of Mind is one of those titles which could have easily been swapped out with a number of other episodes from the series, namely The Schizoid Man or Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling. Not one of the strongest stories, but being The Prisoner, there is still some fairly dynamic stuff in here. Name another show from 1967 that would dare to have an entire storyline centered around lobotomies. Episode 7 is Many Happy Returns. Number 6 wakes to find the village deserted. Realizing there is no one left to keep him captive, he builds a raft and sets sail. After many days at sea, his vessel is intercepted by a pair of gunrunners who loot his supplies and cast the weakened number 6 adrift. However, he manages to board the vessel, incapacitate his aggressors, escape by the skin of his teeth, and swim to shore. Spotting an English bobby, he surmises he must be back in Blighty and conceals himself in the back of a truck, only to find himself a few hours later back in the capital. He returns to his townhouse at 1 Buckingham Place and finds it occupied by a Mrs. Butterworth. After feeding him and allowing him a wash and change of clothes, she grants him use of his old Lotus 7 to return to his place of work. His former colleagues surmise that the trajectory, time, and speed average of his sail home means that the village must be located somewhere off the coast of Morocco. Chartering a jet, number 6 flies to the Moroccan coast to sweep the area and spots the village before the pilot ejects him from the cockpit.
Be seeing you.
And he parachutes back down to the beach. Number 6 returns to his apartment, whereupon the village seemingly springs back to life, and he is greeted by Mrs. Butterworth, who, it transpires, is the new number 2.
Many happy returns.
Many Happy Returns is a first-rate adventure story that grips the viewer with the tantalising prospect of actually getting some answers. Yes, this episode's story is born out of the fact that the creatives behind the show were concerned the audience would succumb to repetition fatigue if number 6 was repeatably unsuccessful in his escape plans week after week, and placing this one a mere 7 episodes into the running order was a bold move, especially coming so soon after episode 2's The Chimes of Big Ben. After all, Many Happy Returns is, to all intents and purposes, essentially a remake of the final third of that episode, only played out for real this time. The 2 big revelations of the episode are that 6's real name is Peter Smith,
Peter Smith.
Enchanting. Be comfortable and I'll be back in a moment.
And the village is located in Morocco. However, many theorise that number 6 is using a pseudonym. Is the village located in Morocco? Logically, it seems it must, as the maths behind number 6's return home would bear this out. They may have been able to pull the wool over his eyes on Six's and Nadia's supposed escape in the chimes of Big Ben, but his return home in Many Happy Returns does rather glue the location of the village to one undeniable locale. Personally, of the 3 possible locations for the village the series presents us with, Morocco is my least favourite, for no other reason than Wales just does not look like Africa. The grass is too green and the weather too inclement. The Lithuania possibility from the chimes of Big Ben makes more sense. Wales can pass for Eastern Europe far more convincingly than Northern Africa, though the Lithuania theory is the one easiest to debunk as a red herring. My own preferred take on the location of the village is the one presented in Fallout, the final episode, where it is revealed the village may simply be a short trip down the motorway from London. And yes, I know the series is supposed to be read as allegory, and therefore the village can be located anywhere and everywhere, which is possibly why we have multiple revelations of its locale throughout. But this is The Prisoner we're talking about, that inherently English series, and to my mind, it's only fitting that this warped version of the provincial English village be located on English shores. Episode 11 is It's Your Funeral. After number 6 finds out about an assassination plot, he goes to warn number 2, believing the whole village will be punished if the attempt is successful. Number 2, in order to discredit number 6, knowing he is the only person in the village capable of stopping a murder, records the warning and doctors the tape. A new arrival enters the Green Dome, proclaiming himself to be the primary number 2, all the others having been stewards while he was away. On Appreciation Day, rule of the village is to be handed over to the younger number 2. But on the day, the watchmaker attempts to assassinate the retiring number 2 by detonating a bomb. However, his plans are foiled by number 6 and the watchmaker's daughter. The retiring number 2 leaves the village by helicopter as number 6 congratulates the new, disgruntled number 2 and assures him that something equally suitable will be arranged when he retires. It's Your Funeral is a fairly by-the-numbers thriller, enlivened by a charismatic turn from Derren Nesbitt as maybe the most likeable number 2, a performance made all the more remarkable by Nesbitt's admission that he really didn't understand the story when he read the script. If this is true, it doesn't show, as he performs the role with a great deal of confidence and charm. This is the second in the number 6 takes down number 2 trilogy, and, like a lot of trilogies, it is sadly a law of diminishing returns with each instalment. That's not to say this one's a dud though. Whilst the resolution is nowhere near as satisfying as Hammer into Anvil, the episode holds together slightly better than the following A Change of Mind. Episode 10 is Hammer into Anvil. When a young woman is driven to her death by number 2, number 6 swears revenge. Putting on a display of eccentricity for the village security, he engages in such acts as timing recordings of classical music in the village shop, leaving a cuckoo clock by number 2's door, which number 2 subsequently dismantles, believing it to be a bomb, attaching a message to a carrier pigeon and releasing it, sending a signal via Morse code of the nursery rhyme Patter cake, baker's man to no one in particular, and finally giving a coded message to a befuddled number 14, leading to a heightened state of paranoia in number 2. Believing everyone to be against him and in cahoots with number 6, the distraught number 2 confronts the prisoner and accuses him of being a double agent sent to spy on him. Feeding on number 2's paranoia, he tells him that if he was a spy, number 2 would be duty-bound not to interfere. The fact that he has, means number 2 has committed an act of treason and is now duty-bound to report himself to his superior. The episode closes with the broken number 2 on the phone, reporting a breakdown in command. This might be my favourite episode. It may be one of the more simplistic storylines, relying not at all on any sci-fi element, and only alluding slightly to anything espionage-based. Although the story ultimately amounts to little more than one man playing a trick on another by way of revenge, it sure is a satisfying 50 minutes of television. There is no more cathartic a takedown than that of Patrick Cargill's snivelling little wretch of a number 2 after callously driving an innocent woman to suicide in the episode's opening moments and seemingly showing no remorse. So, at the end of the initial run of the first 13 episodes, George Markstein left the series. There is very little consensus about why he did, but the age-old adage, creative differences, seems to be the abiding factor, i.e. McGoohan was probably a megalomaniacal prick to work with. He certainly has that air. There was definitely a disparity between Patrick McGoohan's intentions for the series and George Markstein's. Markstein, the show's script editor, can be glimpsed briefly in the opening titles and in Many Happy Returns as the suit behind the desk who McGoohan angrily resigns at. It's clear that Markstein believed he was making a straight-up espionage series about a spy who resigns and has to employ his Secret Service skill set in the defeat of number 2 and the village. This was in stark contrast to McGoohan's take, which was far more analogous. You can feel the push and pull of these two creatives in various episodes, with McGoohan layering on the overt themes and commentary into the narrative, and Markstein clearly trying to rein McGoohan in and reminding him that they were trying to make a piece of entertainment first and foremost. In the middle of episode 4, Free For All, there is a boat chase sequence as number 6 attempts another escape. The sequence has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the plot, which primarily concerns number 6 running for the post of number 2. It's almost as if Markstein tapped McGoohan on the shoulder at the last minute and said we need some action in here. It feels like a script editor's note, and it's one of the most awkwardly crowbarred things in the entire series. In A, B and C we get number 6 clambering through one of those ventilation shafts wide enough for a full-grown man to climb down, which only seem to exist in film and television. The ventilation shaft facilitates number 6's entry into the lab where number 2 and number 14 have been manipulating his dreams. If you were to ask me what I believe Markstein's overall contributions to the series were, it would be basically any moment where the show feels like Danger Man, like The Saints, like The Champions, all the outer left field experimental storytelling feels like McGoohan's contribution. It's no small wonder that when Markstein left after episode 13, leaving McGoohan the central creative force, was when the series largely moved away from its spy series roots and became a lot more bizarre in its presentation. Episode 13 is Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling. The prisoner's mind is transferred into the body of another man, referred to simply as the Colonel by the village authorities. In an attempt to track down a scientist, Professor Seltzman, he awakens back in his London home and encounters his fiancée as memory of the village slowly fades. After failing to convince Janet and his old work colleagues of his true identity, he sets off for Austria to find Professor Seltzman. Tracking him down, it's revealed the village authorities have followed him and he has led them straight to Seltzman. Both men are gassed and return to the village. Seltzman agrees to oversee the switchback. Incorporating himself into the procedure, the equipment malfunctions. A stunned Seltzman proclaims he did his duty before dying.
You must contact number 1 and tell him I did my duty.
The Colonel leaves on a helicopter before number 6 awakes and reveals that the minds of Seltzman and the Colonel were swapped during the procedure, and it is in fact the Professor currently leaving in the helicopter. Do Not Forsake Me, Oh My Darling is the weakest episode in my opinion. This one only came about because McGoohan had to leave to shoot scenes for the film Ice Station Zebra, and so an episode had to be hastily written in which he did not appear. The solution to the problem of having no leading man was to simply cast a different actor to portray Number 6 for an entire episode. Nigel Stock was drafted in for the role of the alternate Number 6 and proceeds to give a strange performance that doesn't really hint at McGoohan's portrayal at all to my mind.
What is your name?
Code or real?
Code?
In France, Duval. In Germany, Schmidt. You would know me best as ZM73. And your code number is PR12. You want more?
The episode was written by the Chimes of Big Ben scribe Vincent Tilsley, who openly admitted he hadn't actually read the scripts for the intervening episodes, leading to one or two contradictions. It also contains a revelation, similar incidentally to a mid-run reveal in Quantum Leap, that Number 6 had a fiancée back home. This largely goes against what has been established before. If this was the case, why didn't Number 6 attempt to contact his fiancée Janet before? Okay, there probably wasn't time to attempt any reunion in the Chimes of Big Ben, but if there was any reunion between 6 and Janet in Many Happy Returns, it was left off screen. You get the impression these were plot points McGoohan would not have signed off on had he been more hands-on, or indeed even around, for the episode's production. Overall, Do Not Forsake Me Oh My Darling comes across as a little convoluted, bearing a plot born out of behind-the-scenes necessity rather than any want to tell a coherent story. It feels the most off tonally, almost like it's from an entirely different show altogether. Episode 14 is Living in Harmony. In a Wild West allegory for the series as a whole, Number 6 is now a lawman in the Old West. After turning in his badge and gun, he leaves his post and is attacked by a gang. Awakening from the beating in the mysterious town of Harmony, he enters a saloon and meets the judge, who asks Number 6 why he resigned from his position as sheriff.
What were your reasons? My reasons.
The prisoner reluctantly takes up the position of Sheriff of Harmony in order to release a young saloon worker named Kathy. As sheriff, he refuses to carry a gun until a killing spree forces him to take one up. After a standoff with a mysterious mute character known simply as the Kid, the prisoner attempts to resign from his post, but the judge refuses. Number 6 asks Kathy to escape with him, but the judge has the Kid kidnap Kathy, and he ends up strangling her to death. Number 6 discovers Kathy's body and buries it. A standoff in the street results in Number 6 killing the Kid, and in a final shootout he picks off several of the judge's men before being shot himself and awakening lying on the floor of the empty saloon. He is back in his usual village clothing, along with headphones and a microphone. All the characters from Harmony are now represented as cardboard cutouts. Number 6 wanders groggily out of Harmony and finds that it is just another annex of the village. He rushes to the Green Dome and finds the judge, the Kid, and Kathy were actually Number 2, Number 8, and Number 22 respectively, and the whole Western episode was yet another hallucination brought on by brainwashing. Number 8 follows a guilt-ridden Number 22 back to the saloon, calls her Kathy, and proceeds to strangle her. Hearing her screams, Number 6 rushes to help, but is too late. Number 22 dies in his arms, her final words wishing it had all been real. Number 2 arrives and Number 8 frantically throws himself off the saloon balcony to his death. This episode is awesome. In fact, when I first watched the series aged 12, I probably would have put it down as my favourite of the bunch, though this may have had something to do with my predilection for what would later be termed in TV as bubble episodes. Living in Harmony is a possible precursor to Red Dwarf's Gunman of the Apocalypse, or indeed any holodeck episode from Star Trek TNG, but most notably A Fistful of Datas. Again, with the series production staff having their finger firmly on the pulse of the modern zeitgeist, director David Tomlin decided to go for a spaghetti western-inspired aesthetic because they were of the moment, rather than one of a more traditional Hollywood western. The silent villain of this episode is played by Alexis Canner, a character I remember terrifying me as a kid. There is an interesting character inversion between number 6 and this character. The kid doesn't say a word during the Western section, yet appears to love the sound of his own voice in the village-based epilogue, whereas conversely, number 6 has the majority of the dialogue in the first half of the story, yet doesn't utter a single line once awakened from his hallucinations. Episode 15 is The Girl Who Was Deaf. An odd title, as the girl in question does not seem at all hard of hearing as far as I can see. The episode is presented in the form of a tall tale, each scene preceded by a children's book illustration of the locale the following scene takes place in. As in Living in Harmony, there is no initial explanation for the change of setting, as number 6 now finds himself back in secret agent/investigator mode and on the trail of a female murderer called Sonia. The two carry out a game of cat and mouse presented as a macabre courtship when the psychotically unhinged killer becomes increasingly enamored with number 6 as he continuously evades her assassination attempts, which involve exploding cricket balls, poisoning in his local pub, entrapment in a Turkish bath, hidden explosives in a funfair tunnel of love, and a veritable assault course of life-threatening booby traps in an abandoned village. Number 6 eventually tracks Sonia to a lighthouse inhabited by her father, Schnips, a man with a Napoleon complex to end all Napoleon complexes. They capture number 6 and reveal that the lighthouse is in fact a giant rocket primed and ready to destroy London. He manages to escape. Sonia and Schnips throw a couple of grenades at the fleeing number 6, but thanks to his previous sabotage of their armory, the grenade's primers explode and destroy the rocket before it's revealed that the whole episode is merely a bedtime story number 6 is telling the children in the village nursery. If this was a movie, it would be a 4 stars out of 4 cult movie and a classic in the subgenre of macabre black comedy. Yes, its inclusion in the series at all is something of an afterthought, but what a delightful afterthought. Maybe you can argue that the production staff were clearly running short on story ideas by this juncture, as the script for this one was originally written as a 2-parter for the abandoned 4th season of Danger Man. For this reason, The Girl Who Was Deaf is the episode for which the number 6 is John Drake theory is made the most vehemently, if the events of the narrative are to be taken at face value and not merely as childish fantasy. The connection is further compounded by the inclusion of Potter, as portrayed by Christopher Benjamin, an actual character crossover from the Danger Man episode Kuroshi. The only other casting crossover from Danger Man was the actor who appeared as John Drake's superior, Richard Wattis, playing a similar role in The Chimes of Big Ben. The later episodes do have an air of McGoohan tiring of the village setting, striving to get number 6 out of there as much as possible, and having the series flirt with different genres. The Western in the case of Living in Harmony, and the absurdist black comedy in the case of The Girl Who Was Deaf. Fallout is a work of pure surrealism, the type Lindsay Anderson and John Luke Goddard were specialising in during the 60s. The Girl Who Was Deaf is arguably a parody of The Avengers or James Bond. It's episode 15 and falls in the run just before we get the series denouement. It's no accident McGoohan placed this just before the series final and an episode called Once Upon a Time, highlighting the prisoner's fairy tale quality. The story even takes place partly in a butcher's, a baker's and a candlestick maker's. The lighthouse rocket foreshadows the locale of number 1 in Fallout. McGoohan knew from the outset he was not going to end the series the way a general audience would have expected at the time, i.e. having number 1 revealed to be a big bad in the vein of Blofeld or any generic Bond villain. The Girl Who Was Death is McGoohan essentially giving the viewing public a wry smile and asking, would this really be what you would want for a series final? Silly, unsophisticated characterization and a ridiculous plan, in this case an attempt to bomb the Capitol in a way any good Avengers or Bond villain would? The fact that McGoohan presents this as a whimsical fairy tale for children is him having a sly dig at these popular franchises of the time and saying, no, this is childish storytelling, and prepare yourself for something quite different when I wrap this up. McGoohan's want to distinguish the series from Bond as much as possible is evident throughout. Be under no misapprehension. Number 6 coming just below the number 007 is no coincidence. Bond was the big game changer in 60s entertainment, and any story thereafter, with even the slightest foothold in the espionage genre, had to acknowledge this. Indeed, McGoohan himself could have been James Bond. He was apparently offered the part, first in 1962, pre-Connery, and then again in 69 and 73, when Connery vacated the role. He turned it down every time because of his Catholicism. He found the character of Bond to be something of an amoral one. Both John Drake and Number 6 rarely fire a gun. I say rarely because there were some notable exceptions, but we'll get onto that. If McGoohan ever had accepted the role, the cinematic Bond character would be very different from the one we know today. Over the years, there have been various attempts to launch a movie version of The Prisoner. I'm not too disheartened that we haven't seen one to date. I think the concept really works best thanks to the episodic nature of the series, which lends itself the ability to explore a great many themes and ideas, and this would be greatly diminished, I believe, if the concept was presented through the prism of a single 2-hour story. A few years ago, Christopher Nolan, no less, was on board to make a movie version from a screenplay by Blade Runner and 12 Monkeys scribes David and Janet Peoples. He would ultimately end up abandoning the project for the very reason that he felt the concept would suffer if you were to greatly truncate the story. Another abandoned movie version was to be made by Simon West of Con Air fame. Thank God we never got that iteration. Now, there are a couple of muted versions I would have maybe been intrigued to see. After McGoohan's role as Edward Longshanks in 1995's Braveheart, he pitched and wrote a first draft for a big screen Prisoner iteration to be directed by and star his Braveheart co-star Mel Gibson as a new Number 6, with McGoohan reprising the role of the old Number 6, having now returned to the village as the new Number 2. And if there ever was going to be a big screen version, then the late 90s was, I think, the last time it would have hit the zeitgeist with any sort of impact. In 1998 we got The Truman Show, which, advertently or inadvertently, borrowed a great many elements from The Prisoner, and if the village was to be writ large on the big screen, then the depiction of Sea Haven in The Truman Show and Christoph, the ever-seeing eye of the elaborate TV set he created in order to keep Jim Carrey's central protagonist captive, is as close as we are ever likely to get to a big screen iteration. The only other potential movie adaptation that I would maybe be inclined to check out would be one made by Roger Avery, the director of Killing Zoe and The Rules of Attraction, who's probably best known for co-authoring the stories Quentin Tarantino based his Pulp Fiction screenplay on. Avery is a long-time Prisoner fan, as evidenced by his constant name-checking of the series on the Video Archives podcast, which he co-hosts with Tarantino.
You know, I always thought it was just The Prisoner that influenced me, that kind of editorial style and the cynicism and the kind of carnival-like view of the world. I always thought that that was the real influence. Be seeing you.
A further name check of the series can also be found in his Killing Zoe screenplay by Gary Kemp of Spandau Ballet, no less.
But the best episode is A, B, and C, where he takes 3 drugs and he realizes 3 different alternative realities. And this is really good gear, isn't it?
This all goes to show, to my mind at least, that the guy's penchant for genre elements presented in an interesting and intelligent way may mean Avery could be just the right fit for the Prisoner movie director's chair. The closest we've ever come to getting a movie made was the 2009 6-episode miniseries remake, which I won't dwell on for too long. I watched it when it came out and was thoroughly underwhelmed. If memory serves, there was an attempt to emulate McGoohan's approach, whilst contemporaneously taking inspiration but not fully recreating the original series concept. The number 6 of the remake, as portrayed by Jim Caviezel, had his memory wiped prior to his arrival in the village. Ian McKellen plays number 2, and no one else does. And whilst the approach of the series may have attempted to emulate the original, with a mixture of intrigue and a sometimes almost nonsensical approach to narrative, it was all just done with less deft hands than McGoohan's, and the end result was a largely forgettable endeavour. A second series was never commissioned, and you get the impression the showrunners were gearing themselves towards a narrative that would be wrapped up in further instalments, which were never produced. There were certainly a great many loose ends and story threads left unresolved at the conclusion of the final episode. I didn't even bother revisiting the series in preparation for this video, as I feel it is more of an interesting curio rather than a legitimate continuation of the 67/68 series. The original was such a burst of creativity. It's as if McGoohan had a very specific idea of what he wanted to say, and once he got it out of his system, he really had nothing more to give creatively. There was little else to rail against. The series was such a bombastic, all-encompassing statement, it kind of bankrupted him artistically. He never really attempted to do something on this scale again. He had one directorial film credit post The Prisoner, but his bread and butter was really supporting character roles from here on in. I have read rumours that part of the reason for this may have been the fact that one of his daughters got very ill at some point in the 70s, and he couldn't devote himself to his craft as much as he wished because he was busy, get this, not tending to her needs but finding a cure for her condition, which, by all accounts, he did. All 3 of his daughters are very much alive and healthy to this day. I mean, if that is not a sign of genius perfectionism, I don't know what is. McGoohan was a great writer-director, and to my mind, there is no better example of this than the Columbo episodes he did. Columbo is one of the greatest TV series ever made. It may not have had the existential scope of The Prisoner, but it's still as technically perfect and well executed as TV has ever got. McGoohan, a friend of Peter Falk in real life, made 6 contributions towards Columbo between 1974 and 2001, playing 4 different villains, directing 3 of these episodes, as well as a further 2 he didn't appear in. He also has a writing credit on his final directorial effort, Murder with Too Many Notes, which was, incidentally, the second to last episode ever made, and featured Billy Connolly as the murderer of the week. Now, as good as Columbo is, it can't be denied that the quality of the show was greatly elevated in any episode McGoohan had a hand in. The level of intensity he brought to The Prisoner bled over into his Columbo episodes. His crowning glory on the series, to my mind, was Agenda for Murder, where the preparation for the crime is played out with all the precision and attention to detail you would see in the likes of certain scenes from Prisoner episodes like Hammer into Anvil or A, B and C. There is also evidence here and there of something McGoohan doesn't really get enough credit for, his sense of humour. Having Columbo become a largely self-referential character and prone to self-parody,
You come to tell me there's one more thing.
That's a yes.
was seen as the series' downfall largely towards the end of its run in the 90s. However, it's often overlooked that when a series reaches its supposed jumping the shark moment, said moments tend to come about because of a creative vision, and it takes someone with balls like McGoohan's to realise moments such as these. Only he would have no qualms about having a character ask Columbo his wife's name.
If it's not too much trouble, my wife would love to have your autograph.
Why, of course, Lieutenant. What's her name?
And having him reply,
Mrs. Columbo.
almost breaking the fourth wall and finally acknowledging the fact that his wife's name was never mentioned once on screen. The problem was that once Falk had made this joke, he got hooked on it, revealing his first name to be Lieutenant.
What's your first name?
Lieutenant.
And his dog's name to be Dog.
He's a dog, so we call him Dog.
But it never worked quite as well as the Mrs. Columbo gag from Agenda for Murder, and I can well believe a joke as bizarre as this could only have been McGoohan's own contribution to the show. Another example of self-referential humour, and something that ties in more directly to The Prisoner, can be found in McGoohan's earlier contribution to the series, Identity Crisis, in which his character signs off with the mantra that was as close as The Prisoner ever got to having a catchphrase: "Be seeing you."
Be seeing you.
Bye. Be seeing you.
Well, in that case, I'll be seeing you. Seeing you.
Be seen. I hope so, sir.
Episode 16 is Once Upon a Time, and essentially acts as part 1 of the series final. Leo McKern's number 2 returns to the village, charged with the task of breaking number 6 once and for all. He decides the only way is to use a system known as Degree Absolute, a battle that will leave one of them dead. If number 6 wins, he will have survived the ultimate test and meet number 1. In the embryo room, number 2 regresses number 6 back to previous points in his life, all centred around Shakespeare's 7 Ages of Man. Over the course of the week, number 6 subtly gains the upper hand in the proceedings, resulting in the death of number 2. The supervisor enters and asks number 6 what he wants.
Number 1. I'll take you.
Number 6, the supervisor and the butler depart the room. This is really where you see McGoohan taking full flight creatively. He was not afraid at this point to let the series tip over into full-blown surrealism, something which it had only flirted with up until this point. And what you get in Once Upon a Time is essentially an almost Samuel Beckett-inspired two-hander between himself and McKern, two characters attempting to best each other through tricksy wordplay.
Why, pop, why, pop, why, pop, pop, why, pop, why, pop.
McKern, by all accounts, had a nervous breakdown whilst filming this episode, simply as a result of finding himself in the crossfire of McGoohan's intensity, and production had to be halted for 3 whole days whilst the actor recovered. The episode was originally intended to be the final of the first season, with the tantalising cliffhanger ending of McGoohan finally being introduced to number 1. However, when the decision was made to cut the running order of the series short from 26 episodes down to 17, Once Upon a Time was instead rescheduled as the penultimate episode and the lead-in to the series final. The final episode is called Fallout. Following the events of Once Upon a Time, the prisoner is introduced to the President of the Assembly. He witnesses the trials of number 48 and Leo McKern's resurrected number 2. Presented with the opportunity to finally meet number 1, number 6 enters a rocket and comes face to face with a hooded figure. He removes the shadowy figure's mask, revealing a second mask, that of a gorilla. Number 6 removes this one too, and the audience is greeted with the image of number 1, a deranged version of number 6 himself. The robed figure escapes into the hatch above. Number 6 locks the hatch and initiates a countdown, sending the President and the Assembly into a panic, and an evacuation of the village is ordered. Number 6 frees number 2, number 48 and the butler. Together they gun down the armed guards before commandeering a low loader and fleeing the village as the rocket launches. Upon arrival in London, the 4 escapees go their separate ways. Number 2 enters the Palace of Westminster, whilst the butler escorts number 6 back to his home. The butler enters 1 Buckingham Place, while 6 sets off in his Lotus 7. The episode ends with the thunderclaps from the series' opening sequence, as well as the shot of number 6 driving on an open country road. Fallout uses the veneer of overt surrealism. The story makes sense, the presentation does not. The suggestion that the search for the one in charge will drive you to madness, as it is ultimately folly. There is no number 1, everything is chaos, number 1 is everyone. If you haven't seen The Prisoner, then you really should have by now. I'm just going to assume that everyone watching this video is aware of the big reveal at the end of the series. It's a guarded point McGoohan is making here with the 6 is 1 revelation, even though it makes no logical sense in a universe that follows the laws of physics how number 6 and number 1 can be one and the same person. On a thematic level, the clues to number 1's identity are there right from the beginning. Right from the opening crawl, number 6 asks,
"Who is number 1?
Number 2 replies,
"You are number 6.
This is generally read as number 2 telling number 6 he has been assigned an arbitrary number, but it would only take a slight shift in emphasis to read it as the answer to his question. Who is number 1? You are number 6.
Who is number 1?
You are number 6.
You are number 6.
You are number 6.
The filmmaker Alex Cox, in his book I Am Not a Number, Decoding the Prisoner, does go some way to try to justify this ending as making a kind of logical sense. He theorises that number 6 is not a former spy at all, but a former scientist who was working on the British space programme and had aspirations to travel to the moon, as alluded to in the chimes of Big Ben.
The whole Earth as the village. Yes.
That is my hope.
What's yours? I'd like to be the first man on the moon.
Upon learning the programme is to be refocused away from space travel and towards arms manufacturing, our highly moral protagonist resigns in a fit of rage. The higher-ups, knowing the information he has in his head to be invaluable on the open market, incarcerate him in the village. He isn't the only former scientist there. The village is a bustling scientific community, hence the proliferation of scientific exploration which goes on there. However, as number 6 refuses to conform, he gradually becomes more experimented on than experimenter. In Fallout, when 6 is taken to number 1, it isn't supposed to be a person, it's supposed to be the rocket itself, the number 1 manned mission to the moon. The mysterious figure in the robe? Merely a demented ape, genetically modified to resemble number 6, the intended first man on the moon. Why an ape, you ask? Well, what were we largely sending up into space at the time?
The monkey thing was we're all supposed to, according to various theories extant these days, come from the original ape, so I just used that as a symbol, you know. Mm-hmm. The bestial thing, and then the other bestial face behind it, which is laughing and jeering and jabbering like a monkey.
In the end, the prisoner is successful in achieving his goal of a mass breakout, but resorting to the one thing he had steadfastly refused to do throughout the series, take up arms and use violence to achieve his ends. This was the 60s. Shades of revolution, as extolled by the likes of Che Guevara, were in the air. The prisoner, Leo McKern's former number 2, and number 48 escape in a truck and drive to London, contradicting what was established in the chimes of Big Ben and Many Happy Returns about the village's location being on foreign soil. Number 6 returns to his home and the butler enters. The door closes automatically, exactly the same way the doors in the village would. The closing credits play. Leo McKern, Alexis Canna, and Angelo Muscat all get individual credits. McGoohan's credits simply reads Prisoner, The suggestion being that although the character has escaped, he isn't free. None of us are truly free. We all live in the village. The series ends with McGoohan in his Lotus 7 racing towards the camera just as he had at the start of every episode, suggesting the series will take place in an endless loop forevermore. One final apology for my GCSE reading. As a final episode, it's an absolute masterpiece and should be viewed now by those working in television, if only to show what you can do with a final episode. I don't think you would have a series bow out with such an out of left field approach now, simply because no one would have the balls to do it. Which side runs the village? The Russians? The Chinese? No, it's the Brits, of course. In the era of the Cold War, it was commonplace for fiction with a bent towards entertainment to take the standpoint of West good, East bad. The Prisoner was extremely daring in its suggestion that one side might not necessarily be any better than the other. How do we know the Brits run the village? Well, just look at the place. Has the blueprint for perfect world order ever looked so provincially English? If China were to design such a community, you can guarantee it would look nothing like this. You only have to listen to the accents of every single number 2 to hear who is in charge.
Why he resigned? I believe that he was going to sell out.
Look, old chap, we've been through many scrapes before, but we've never fallen out over them.
I don't think we need to waste time there. Whatever number 6 learns from the Rook will teach him there's no point in rebelling.
How did they manage to get so many of Six's former colleagues to willingly come here? Six's superiors being in on the subterfuge in the chimes of Big Ben, Leo McKern's number 2 entering Parliament at the end of Fallout, all point towards the British being the true architects and perpetrators of number 6's incarceration. Is number 6 a prophet? Allusions certainly abound throughout the series, although McGoohan stated in one of his rare interview appearances that he didn't knowingly put any overt biblical allusions into the series. Over the years, some of the more analytical fans have attempted to read a biblical subtext into the show, and the almost messianic quality of number 6, the saviour who arrives to free us all, the use of the song Dem Bones in Fallout, a direct allusion to a passage in Ezekiel, does at least highlight McGoohan's own religious background bleeding into his work. Do we learn much about number 6? Well, again, according to McGoohan, all the clues you need are interwoven into the fabric of the series. Nothing was really left unresolved. Who was number 6? As well as Alex Cox's former scientist theory, there are rumours that George Markstein was layering into the episodes prior to his departure and McGoohan taking things in a different direction. The notion that number 6 was in fact the architect who originally drew up the blueprints for the village, his story essentially being one of the creator trapped in a personal hell of his own devising. I actually quite like this as a concept, and it would just about make sense on a story level when he asks at the beginning,
"Where am I?"
He does seem to accept the very glib response of,
"In the village."
Readily, without the need for much further explanation. It's entirely feasible that McGoohan, as both character and story creator, could have conceived of the notion and function of the village without any prior knowledge of its eventual location, or indeed which side he was actually designing the place for. The series is one of those rare examples of what happens when you hand over total creative control to a genius. McGoohan adhered to the spy series just enough that he was able to smuggle his own rhetoric into the production. In a way, McGoohan was number 6, a lone voice subverting the status quo from within. The series was broadcast by ATV, the London-based regional arm of ITV. It was originally dismissed as just another ATV spy series that got a little bit weird at the end. Over time, with the formation of societies like the 6 of 1 fan club and a handful of smart people latching onto it and recognising there was a little more going on in the series than would first meet the eye, it has now been largely re-evaluated as art. I've noticed a lot of Oxbridge types like Alex Cox and Stephen Fry tend to be fans of The Prisoner because of the multi-layered nature of the series. Not to sound elitist, because I think you can appreciate the series on a surface level, to an extent, but to be able to fully engage with some of the more overt themes requires a certain level of intelligence, maybe a level higher than my own. I watched it for the first time on Channel 4 in the 90s. I didn't watch every episode, or indeed fully understand the ones I did, but like everything at the time I failed to comprehend in its entirety, I still found it intriguing enough to want to return to it in later years and dissect the elements I didn't quite get the first time around. 2 or 3 years after seeing the series for the first time, I visited Port Merion on a family holiday and bought a t-shirt bearing the legend, "I am not a number, I am a free man," from the Prisoner shop. Around the time of it being re-evaluated as art, the series was also being commercialised as a piece of nostalgic cult television in the same vein as Star Trek or Red Dwarf. The Prisoner is a fascinating series, truly multi-layered, expertly crafted, mounted and performed. It's almost perfect as a one-off piece of cult television, entertaining and baffling enough for a general audience, intriguing enough for elitist fans, and something of a blueprint for modern television. The series sits alongside the likes of Kafka's The Trial, Huxley's Brave New World, Terry Gilliam's Brazil, and Orwell's 1984. It's that important a work. Of course, it was only a matter of time before a YouTube channel called Big Buddha Is Watching decided to take a look at this one. The fact that the final episode incensed ITV audiences to such an extent that McGoohan allegedly had to go into hiding for a fortnight in a cabin with no phone in Scotland to weather the storm shows it's a piece of art that presses buttons. Nearly 60 years later, and viewed through a modern lens, it's lost none of its potency. The quality of the writing, storytelling, and some dynamic powerhouse performances means the series can still be watched and enjoyed today, as its themes are just as relevant now as they were back in the late 60s. And it will take something as earth-shattering as the fall of capitalism and the collapse of society as we know it for the series to lose any of its relevance. And now, because it's the law that you have to sign off every single retrospective on The Prisoner in exactly the same way, be seeing you.